Hello, everybody, and welcome to another live stream. It's great to see so many people already here. This is the 28th live stream, believe it or not. Also, thanks for showing up because, of course, I did say at the end of last week that it will be on Sunday, not on Saturday, but things changed and I managed to do it on a Saturday. So thanks to those of you who picked it up and are here. Lots of the good old regulars, Bill's here, Hattie's here, Bob's here, and so on. Just a couple of introductions and we'll get stuck straight in because there's a whole lot of questions, including some that I didn't get to do last week. So that's good that they've been posted again. Just to remind you, this is a live stream. So everything that happens on the next hour that we're together is driven by people leaving comments and questions. So I will cover whatever those questions and topics are. If you're watching this afterwards, which many, many people do, I said every week, like literally thousands of people watch it afterwards, which is amazing. Remember, if there's a question you don't like or aren't interested in, just keep skipping forward rather than stop watching. So first of all, I thought I'd do a couple of quick updates. First of all, if you can hear a noise, although it's disappearing now, for some reason, maybe it's the fame of the live stream, there's a helicopter hovering just above the house here. So it's either the police or paparazzi or something. It is drifting away a bit, so hopefully you can't actually hear that news. So hopefully that's the case. So a lot's been happening over the last week, and I've seen there's already a couple of questions on it, so I won't spend a lot of time doing a recap of some of the things that are happening. But one thing I did want to start off with is I had some contacts from a lobbying group in Australia talking about cruising in Australia. So I thought I would touch a little bit on that very quickly because I haven't covered Australia for a while because not a lot's happening. But as you probably know, nothing really is happening on cruising. There's been a lot of lobbying. So I thought I would just draw attention, and I'm just going to bring it up here. There is a group called resumecruising.org that is trying to pull together some lobbying to really improve things and hopefully move things forward in Australia. They're a little bit frustrated if I look at it from the progress or lack of progress that Clear are making. So there is actually a petition which is going now, it's on the official Australian government website, which people, I guess, in Australia and New Zealand, because it seems to cover those two, can go and fill out. So I've put a link to that in the notes of this particular live broadcast. And they do, of course, recommend, though, the people, even though they're a little bit frustrated with Clear, I guess, is wearecruise.org is the Australian Clear organization, which has lots of social media, assets you can use, etc., to promote. And what they're really asking for is if the cruising community can help support their request. What they're looking for is much as happening in the UK and around the world is local cruises for local people in local waters. That's basically what they're doing. So if you do want to get behind that, again, the links are in the live show notes. Big news, I guess, of the week. We have quite a lot happening in the United States now, and I'll come to a couple of those questions in a second around that. But we have seen some test cruises now being approved by the CDC. So we have lines like Celebrity with Celebrity Edge and Captain Kate McHugh, who will be commanding that ship. We've got Carnival announcing a ship out of Miami in June, and I had to write it down. It's Horizon. And then out of Galveston, they've got Vista and Breeze. I guess we've got Norwegian have now shown how they plan to bring their ships back between now and the end of the year. Oceania, now with their program, which bringing ships back, I think it's between October and January. As you can see, I write notes. And my mother always said I should be a doctor because my notes are almost impossible to read. So that's exciting. There's progress happening on the US front. It looks like there will be cruises starting up in the sort of end June, July time. We've also, at the same time, of course, seen that a couple of lines have canceled some of their Caribbean home ports, I guess, skeptics would say, because they weren't really selling. People, I think, in the US are probably holding on anyway for domestic cruises to start. So we've seen all Caribbean cancel theirs out of Muda. We've seen now, we also saw, it was Norwegian, wasn't it, canceling out of the Dominican Republic. We've also seen some good news on river cruising, which is now planning to start up in Europe, particularly now that the EU is starting to open up more for travel and hoping to allow certainly people from the US, which is pretty fundamental, coming into the EU. The UK, patchy in terms of what people being allowed in at the moment over the next couple of weeks into Europe. We've got restrictions from France, from Germany, and from Austria, so that affects all of the ability to go river cruising because of the Indian variant, which is bubbling up in the UK, although hopefully the numbers are still quite low. So that's a quick jog through some of the news. So I thought I would touch on probably what we call as the elephant in the room, which I see a couple of people have asked. And then I promise you, the JM129, I'll come back to the question you asked last week that I didn't answer. And I'm so pleased that you've asked that because I was planning to cover that. So a couple of people asked, I know Bob asked, let me find it here. And I saw someone else ask it. So with regard to vaccination verification or not of what cruise lines can do in Florida, how do you see the CDC versus state of Florida being resolved? And I did see somebody else asked a similar question along that line. Barry asking, yes, Sunday's come early, as I said, thanks for picking that up. And how do I see the state of Florida versus NCL versus CDC proof of vaccination issue being resolved? Well, it's very interesting because just for those of you who are not 100% sure what that question is about, so basically in Florida, Governor DeSantis had introduced a bill, an act, a rule, whatever, which says that businesses operating in Florida cannot ask for proof of vaccination when people come into their business, whatever that is. And the argument being that it was discriminatory, although a couple of you pointed out some other discriminatory things allowed when it comes to wedding cakes and who you can sell it to. But anyway, that's another discussion. So, so the rule is that you can't do it now. When Celebrity announced that they had got approval for their cruises out of Miami, and that they were going to be running vaccination, so proof of vaccination, everyone over the age literally of 18 dropping down to the age of 12, so that they could then hit the CDC rule of around 95% of passengers on board the ships would be vaccinated, because obviously kids under that age can't be. The governor's office said that every person that Celebrity asks for that proof of vaccination would incur a fine of $5,000 US. So everyone's kind of, how do we reconcile what the CDC are trying to do to say, basically, if you have vaccinations, we'll let cruising resume and you know, a June, July timeframe. The governor saying in Florida, you can't do it. Norwegian Cruise Lines had basically said before, as someone picked up in the comments there, that Norwegian said, if we're not allowed to sell vaccinated cruises, we will not sell in Florida, we'll move elsewhere. So how's it all going to boil down? Now, of course, nobody kind of knows how it's going to boil down, but I did see on Friday, or was it Thursday night? Maybe it's Thursday night into Friday. There was actually a telephone conference between some of the Royal Caribbean sales team, some travel agents, and so on. And what they basically spoke about, so it was Royal Caribbean Group, obviously, which includes Celebrity. And what they were talking about is they are working with the governor's office. And you got the impression for what they were saying is, it sounds like they're basically trying to look for some kind of fudge or some kind of workaround or some kind of wording, so all sides save face, because clearly cruising out of Florida is mammoth and hugely important to the economy. So it sounded like from that they're trying to find some way of resolving that problem. It's also interesting because I picked up through some various Twitter feeds, etc. There's been a lot of discussion as well from the legal side, where the view is that actually legally, because of the nature of the way cruise lines are, where they're registered, how it works, and the rules, there may be a fudge around that as well. So the answer is, we don't know how it's going to get resolved, but it seems extremely likely that the cruise lines, the CDC and Florida will find a solution. It seems to me they have to find a solution of some kind. So I suspect we will see over the next month or week or so, I guess we're in June almost already, aren't we? We will see much more progress on that. It feels to me from the statements that they're getting close to resolving it. Now, that may just be optimistic talk from the cruise lines, but I also have a feeling that it seems unlikely that, you know, Carnival would be announcing something out of Miami, Celebrity would be announcing out of Miami without being confident that it could happen. So that's the latest that I have, and hopefully that helps. I mean, as we know, we've got cruise lines which are sailing out of Seattle, which are going to be vaccinated. Sorry, that helicopter's back over. Hopefully this mic's not picking up too much. Where this whole thing is not an issue. What I am personally very interested to see, because I think they will resolve it, is how in the US it's going to be proven, the vaccine. Because as we've spoken before and here and other places, we have an app which has the information on. We have QR codes, and that's true in many countries around the world. Whereas at the moment, the US doesn't have that. So it's going to be interesting to see eventually what the actual physical proof is it that card or whatever. I did see also in the newspaper, though, that the State Department is working on some form of digital proof, because the realization is that as people travel outside of the US, countries are requiring some kind of proof. So that's going to be pretty interesting to see how that settles out. So it was kind of a long way of answering your question, but hopefully that does answer that. And I think we will see a resolution pretty soon, particularly as more and more of these cruise lines start announcing the sailing. So there's a couple of questions that I'll come to, but I do want to answer. So I've just got my little iPad here, which I use to keep a track of the questions as well as it shows up on my system here. But I'm going to answer a question, which is a more, so I'm going to do one thing and then I'm going to answer a quick question, a comment. So Steve said, so happy to watch the live stream. So I really appreciate everybody that comes on and watches the live stream and afterwards. Thanks for helping me get through the pandemic. One of the things I would say is I also have to thank everybody who comes to the live stream, since I run some through the pandemic on and off and now more regularly, and also who watch the videos. It's helped get me through the pandemic enormously. So it's also thanks very much to you. And it's actually great to see how many people come to the live stream, but also just how many people are watching the videos again as cruising resumes. I've had like a record month this month. In May, I had a record month. It's even beating a record month in April. It's not quite entirely back to some of the peaks before the pandemic, but it's clear that people are back out watching videos. So thank you very, very much for that. So let's go to the JM129. Good to see you here. Of these 28, I suspect you've been to, I don't know how many of them, if not all 28. You've almost been on the live stream more than I have. So the JM129, what is someone missing by never sailing with lines like Seabourn, Silversea, and Regent compared with lines like Celebrity and Princess? Is the experience appreciably better? So it's a very interesting question, right? And sorry I didn't get a chance to get to it last week. One of the things I would say is obviously from an experience, it's a more expensive experience, generally speaking. Of course, if you go with some of those premium suites on Celebrity or Princess, you know, the prices kind of match out. So a lot of it for me is really around, it's one of those, it's almost the intangible things that you can really put your finger on to explain it. I think when I've been on Seabourn or Silversea, I haven't been on Regent, I've only toured their ships so far, is there is definitely a sense that it's a bit like when you stay at a 4-star hotel versus a really good 5-star hotel. Everything is just a little bit richer, if you like. So the quality of everything is upped. So everything in your cabin, you know, the linen, the toiletries, you get the towels, and the quality of service is definitely up a notch, partly because, of course, there's fewer people on, although some of those ships are getting bigger and bigger. But if you look, I think we're around about 600 people, something bizarre like 606 on the new Seabourn ships and the Silversea ships. So it's a smaller number, and the ratio of staff to passengers higher. So actually the service is a little bit less frantic. There's definitely a high level of quality of service. I found the crew get to know you much better because there's fewer people to get to know. And certainly from a quality of food perspective, I've always felt it is up a notch. Now, of course, there are other, you know, great qualities of food, but I think just that it's that sense. It's a sense of pampering. It's a sense of how you feel on board there. Oops, sorry, just kicked that. Shudder, not an earthquake. So that's what I've found much more so, because in reality, when you look at things like the itineraries, you can find some slightly more unique itineraries. You can find they will go into slightly different ports, but they still largely cover the same places, you know, as Silversea or as a Princess or Celebrity. So it's one of those things, and it's a good question, because sometimes when I look at, you know, if you have a choice of going, say, in a suite, if you want to splash out, because it's that sort of price. If you want to go in a suite in Celebrity, or do you want to go on what would be a smaller cabin on those, what would you do? Turn it into a slip of water. And in reality, part of the answer to that question is around how many facilities you want. So if you're going on those ships, they will not have as big a glitzy production. So you will have a 6-piece, singer-dancer group. You won't have those big production shows. If you like gambling, it's a really small, maybe 2 or 3 tables and a couple of machines, etc. Slot machines. So everything is just on a small scale. So if you were saying, I want to have a suite, and depending on the cruise line you're on, the butler service is all fantastic, but I also want to have all of those big glitzy shows, then you would find that experience probably less fulfilling. So that's kind of how I see it. It's a really good topic. Maybe I should probably do some sort of video around that, exploring a little bit more detail. But that for me is definitely the key difference. It's a sense of, do I want to stay in a really good 4-star hotel with more facilities, or a 5-star hotel perhaps with less sort of facilities? Not probably less facilities, smaller scale facilities. So hopefully that kind of answers that. So let's have a look. Lots of regulars here. So we've got Annie Kirsty here, which is fantastic. Francis is here. Bill, I think I've mentioned. Jenny's with Josh. So I'm going to come back. I've seen a question here. Someone's obviously watched this week video. It's hard to believe that you're shy and don't start conversations on ships. That's a reference to the video that came out this week around meeting people, etc. I think it's interesting. Stand NYCK. I think that's probably I do. One thing that's very interesting, I think you'll actually find it quite interesting. You'll find with quite a lot of people who do blogs and vlogs is actually they are inherently quite reserved, and coming in front of the camera, I guess, it's always less risky, which is interesting. Heather, hi Heather, good to see you. Heather was one who picked up that I didn't remind everybody that I'd moved it from Sunday to Saturday. What do you think is the biggest factor at play in the slow return to all ships cruising? Country restrictions, difficulty getting enough crew, or something else? Good question. In reality, what the cruise lines are saying is it's more around just the logistics of bringing all the ships back on stream, and particularly with crew. One of the big challenges they've got with crew is obviously the pace of vaccinations in those countries themselves is way behind, say, the US, the UK, and so on. So actually, and because more and more cruise lines have committed to having vaccinated crew, both from a passenger reassurance perspective and also, I think, from a crew protection perspective, is getting them vaccinated is more of a challenge. So that's one issue. The second issue, of course, is we're seeing in some of those countries, they're entering their 3rd or 4th wave. We obviously very aware of the situation in India. So you've also got that big challenge of bringing crew back. And if you look at what's happening with the crew coming back, they're going effectively through a full month of quarantine before they come back. So if you look at what's happening, so before, I'll give you an example of what's happening, because I've seen a lot on Crew Center and some other vlogs and things I look at. So but what basically happens with crew, so if you're coming back from the Philippines or India or wherever, so you have a COVID-19 test as crew, you're then going into a 2-week quarantine in your home country, then tested and then flown to wherever you're coming to, often now on charter flights, not necessarily, but often on charter flights. Then when you're arriving, you're then taken to the ship where you have another test, and you're quarantined again on the ship for up to 2 weeks, and you have your various tests, and then you go into service. What's happening increasingly with the ships in the US is that those crew are then actually being brought into the various ports and vaccinated, heading back out, then I guess coming back for their second jab. So you're actually seeing crew, there's a month where they, before the crew can actually be brought back into active service. So that's one big issue. And also just re-energizing the supply chain and just the pure logistics of bringing the ships from the kind of hot to cold layup back. That is one of the biggest restrictions of all, certainly from the cruise line's perspective. So even if you look at the ships that are coming back in the UK, which, they've said it's going to take that 12 weeks, even though they've got the go-ahead to start setting it. It's just then getting the whole supply chain, the food and the drink and all that re-energized. But one of the biggest bottlenecks seems to be the crew. Undoubtedly, amongst all of that is, of course, country restrictions, because actually you're still pretty limited around the world on where you can sail. So, the UK is saying you can only sail in the UK. We're seeing things starting up in the US where it appears that they're going to be talking about calling on some places, but it largely seems to be Cozumel, Costa Maya, for example. so we're seeing even in Europe, there's lots of restrictions on where they can sail because some of those countries are still under restrictions or have quarantining rules and so on. So it's quite difficult to actually open up and run lots of itineraries, which is why you'll find most of the interesting itineraries are still much later on. So, but crude is definitely one of the big, really big bottlenecks. So it's great to see some other people. So Amber, good to see Amber. Amber's just recently back from the first MSC Virtuosa. There was quite a lot of other bloggers and vloggers on there. So Cruise Amber was there, Emma Cruises was there, Ben and David were there. So if anyone actually wants to go and see a little bit about what happened with those, take a look at Cruise with Amber. Emma's got a video up, and Ben and David, I think, have got 2 videos up now. I think I've watched 2. There's one embarkation day 1 and another one. So if you want to go and see what those are like. So let's have a look. The JM129 has to ask 2 questions, definitely, since I didn't ask you a question last week. For those potentially booking a new cruise now, are there any important things to consider, price, experience, etc., based on the fluidity of guidelines? This is a really interesting question. It's something that I've been wrestling with, so that's why it's a great one to see here. I think for me, probably the most important of all to start with is to make sure that you understand and are comfortable with the restrictions as they currently are, because we don't really know how fast they're going to be eased. So, for example, Royal Caribbean are talking about they're hoping that they won't have to have the mask rule, but they don't know that yet. At the moment, the rules are around social distancing, masks, testing. You can't mix with people. Excursions only in cruise line bubbles. All those things. So I would start off by saying, if you're booking a new cruise now, and you're certainly booking this year, because I think once we get into next year, hopefully it'll be better. But I would really say, are you comfortable with the restrictions as they are? So if when you step on board that ship or head to that ship, are you comfortable enough? Because I've seen a lot of people like, oh my God, I have to wear a mask, or I have to do these things, and they're just not comfortable with this. I would say that is absolutely the most important thing. The second thing I would say is flexibility. Are you booking something that's flexible and ideally gives the option of cash refund, which is pretty remote these days, because you might see like the Odyssey of the Seas in Israel, or whatever gets cancelled or changed. Are you comfortable enough that there's enough flexibility? First of all, if you get ill or whatever and you have to cancel, is there flexibility there? What are the rules? But also, if you just don't want to go, you actually get closer and you feel uncomfortable because you feel, I don't like the regulations, the country they're calling on, I'm not sure we can do the ports, whatever that is. So are you really, do you have flexibility? And also within that flexibility are you also comfortable enough that if it gets cancelled, that you have all your money tied up in a future cruise credit? Because a lot of those policies, like the Cruise with Confidence, which allow you to cancel up to 48 hours before, but it's all around future cruise credit. So, when I look at my schedule heading out, I've got 17, I was looking at it the other day, a little bit obsessive. As I look this year into next year, which is pretty much full, I have 17 cruises booked. But of those 17 cruises, I think there's only 4, maybe 5, that I haven't paid in full for yet, because they're all rolling over future cruise credits or payments. So, that's a lot of money tied up. Now, I know I'm unusual because I do the channel and have lots of cruises, but are you really comfortable with those and the rules? Those for me are the absolute absolute critical ones. Then obviously you get into then you get into more normal things like what's the pricing like? Is it fluid and flexible? And certainly looking at pricing is not going up as much. I know a couple of people have contacted me because we've spoken about it before. We're talking to a couple of travel agents, they're seeing river cruising pricing going up, and river cruising is already kind of a bit of a premium, but not as many ships are coming on and it's uncertain. But overall pricing is, it's not kind of, it's not really that crazy, but I would say that's the absolute key. Hopefully that's answered your question. So, I'm going to touch again on insurance. I see quite a few people ask insurance. Insurance is one of my slight obsessions. Do you buy cruise insurance? If yes, from the cruise line or independent agency. Someone else asking around cruise insurance questions. So let me just talk a little bit about cruise insurance. I have touched on it before, but it's worth definitely touching on it again. Now, depending on where you're cruising from, there are slightly different rules. However, first thing I would say is absolutely critical to have cruise insurance. Of many of the startup cruises, and we'll see what happens in the United States with all the fine detail of the rules. But let's use the UK, for example. The same was true in Singapore. It was the same of the Italian cruises out of Italy and so on. So I'm assuming we'll see a similar thing in the US. Is you have to have cruise insurance, which has to have a number of elements. First of all, it has to be cruise-specific insurance. And I think I mentioned before, my previous insurance would cover me for going on cruises, but it wasn't cruise-specific. So I actually moved providers when I renewed my annual policy. So cruise-specific. Secondly, it has to include, and the cruise-specific is really important because that covers things like, if you have to be evacuated from a ship or whatever. Secondly, it has to specifically have COVID cover. And what the cruise lines require is COVID cover for medical expenses. What makes sense is to make sure that your insurance also covers you if you have to cancel for COVID. So it's not always in there. So for example, when my partner was renewing his insurance, it had the medical part, but he had to pay extra for the COVID cancellation. So that's an important thing to watch. And then there's often a minimum amount that the medical has to cover. Now, what happens now is when you check in, you have to show proof of that insurance. And one or two people, in fact, not more, quite a few people, when they went to the MSC Virtuosa cruise, and someone asked me, did I go on it? And the answer to that was no, by the way. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. But you had to show proof. And if you didn't have that, you were going to be denied access. Now, what MSC had done is they've got actually a insurance company that was then selling insurance there. So that's what you have to have. So really, really important. Now, do I buy it from an independent agency cruise line? I always and have always bought insurance from a specific provider, not from the cruise line. Now, I'll tell you why I do that. First of all, I've generally found, in my experience, I can get a better deal. Better deals may or may not be a better price, often it's been a better price, but actually has more of the inclusions. And so you can also do that. So secondly, the reason I do that is also because I buy an annual policy. Now, I know in the US, I don't know, Jack, if you're in the US, it seems that annual policy is less of a thing. Certainly in Europe and the UK, buying annual policy is quite a common thing. So it's better to buy that independently. So that's certainly my approach. And I get asked the insurance question quite a lot. As a minimum, I would always look at an alternative. And there are a couple of, you can either go individually, but they're normally, in most countries, there's normally pretty good price comparison site. So in the UK, there's things like Money Supermarket and sites like that. I think even like Go Compare. In the US, there's one called Trip Insurance, which is a price comparison site. So definitely, that's worth at least taking a look at and seeing what sort of prices that you get. So hopefully that answered that. If not, leave it there, and I will do that. Sandy, good morning from California. Good to see you there. I'm planning to book to cruise in 2023. A lot of people I'm seeing actually increasingly both on the channel, lots of people commenting around waiting for 2023, just because they want everything to be settled and calm and clarity. So I think, Sandy, you're probably amongst a lot of friends, as it were. Annie and Kirsty we're going to be seeing them or meeting them in person, hopefully on that Cunard cruise. So the Cunard cruise being 3 nights, what will the dress code be? And because we haven't seen that, I actually went on and had a look at that. But being Cunard, I would be like 99.99999% sure at least one of those is going to be a formal night. So on Cunard, there used to be 3 dress codes, and they changed a couple of years ago to 2 dress codes. And dress code number 1 is their normal dress code, which is smart casual, but you'll see there's a twist on that, and formal. Now, smart casual means for gents a jacket with a shirt, so normally a suit with a shirt. You don't have to wear a tie. Now, before that, they used to have smart casual, which was no tie. Then you'd have smart, I think, which was tie. So then it's equivalent for ladies. So I guess cocktail dress is probably the equivalent for that. And then formal night is either tuxedo or dark suit, they call it. And that you could wear a suit and tie. But Cunard, really importantly, I guess the point is they are pretty strict, they are strict with the dress code. So if you want to go to any of the main restaurants that you're allocated, whether it's Britannia, Princess, or Queen's Grill, you have to wear the dress code. And so if you don't want to wear the dress code, you can go to the King's Court, the buffet restaurant. Theoretically, you're not supposed to go to the theatre or the casino, but when I've been on ships, I found they've only really, held that rule. They haven't really enforced that rule. So I would say, you've got in your picture there, you've got your tux and you've got your beautiful cocktail dress. From what I could see of it on, I think you're pretty sure you're going to be wearing it. So Cunard are real sticklers on that, and it's part of the Cunard experience that sets them apart. And it's interesting you ask the question on Cunard, because actually I just made a new video, which I filmed this week and now in the process of being edited, about Cunard, kind of an update on Cunard. So keep an eye out for that, because it will be coming out before we actually go on that trip. And as Peter points out, good point, Peter, is they normally on the gala night, so on the formal night, there's normally a ball, and black and white ball is a normal, because obviously it means people have to bring stuff, and they'll have lots of dancing in the Queen's Room and so on. Does Super Chat, so Papa New, does Super Chat not work? It should be working somewhere down at the bottom. It should be working. If you do want to Super Chat, there should be a little thing down there. That should be Super Chat, I think. I think it's enabled. So hopefully that helps. Carl has asked, it's lots of questions coming. So love the channel, which is fantastic. Good to hear. Is it a good idea to book multiple cruises via deposits and pay off according to the first deadlines, so on? And pay off according to the first deadline. Okay, so this is like a phasing of payments. This is also, Carl, this is a great setup, a fantastic setup actually, because the video that I'm due to release tomorrow evening is around this kind of issue, which is around payment and when you should pay and how soon you should pay and should you pay early, shouldn't you pay early, and the pros and cons of each. So hopefully that video will answer more. What I would say is a simple answer to your question is obviously yes with the deposits. One of the things I try to focus on is can you get whatever's the lowest deposit possible. Now in many countries like the UK less so, it's hard to get non-refundable deposits, so you need to be very careful when you're booking, because you may lose that deposit. So you need to be relatively sure that you're going to want to go on that cruise, so to be careful about just booking loads of them. Now in the past, sort of pre-pandemic, Princess Cruise would do a lot of £50, so $75 deposit cruises. So you might say, actually, if I end up losing that, it's not a big deal and I want to lock that in. But just be careful if you are booking lots of cruises that you are sure that you're going to go, because many of those you may not get a refund for. So also be really clear around, are you going to get a refund for those, and if it's a bigger deposit. So if you're going on something like a Virgin, for example, their deposits are pretty big. They're like 20-something%. So it varies between 10-20%. So just be careful. And in terms of paying it, you should really pay the last minute you possibly can, for a couple of reasons. And I'll talk more in the video around if fares change, but also really importantly, because once you've paid that final deposit, which will be, say, depending on the cruise line, 90 days or 60 days or whatever, you'll find cancellation stuff coming. So even if you pay on most cruise lines, say you pay today, but then and then you decide you can't go, won't go, you'll find cancellation percentages click in. So wait the last possible minute to pay. Now, if you've booked directly, you can literally almost pay that on the day. If you book with the travel agent, you normally have to pay about a week before. But that is the better thing to do, particularly this kind of volatility that's going on. And as we said earlier, is also make sure when you book a cruise, is take out insurance at the same time that covers cancellation for any reason. So the advantage, of course, of having an annual policy is I don't have to think about that. But if you booked a cruise that is a non-refundable deposit, taking out insurance, which may not be very much in relative terms to what you're paying, that's another way, of course. If you cancel either at any point up until you go, you can get your money back. So that's really important. So hopefully that answered, and hopefully if I've forgotten other things, then hopefully the video tomorrow will help you much more. So hopefully, thank you very much. Bob said, yes, it works. That's very kind of you, Bob, to do a super chat there. Very, very kind. Thank you. So, and Barbara is, we're planning a world cruise for 2023. Very nice indeed. Which line would you suggest? We're wanting a relaxing cruise. So Barbara, I mean, there's obviously a big myriad of those, and most of the, actually, ironically, most of the world cruises can be pretty relaxing if you go with a true world cruise. So what we find is there's almost two groups of cruises to look at. So one of the groups you've got is the true world cruise. So this is the true circumnavigation, which is probably the most relaxing of all, I would suggest. And the true circumnavigation is lines like Cunard, Holland America, I think Princess do it. You know, those more classic cruise lines will do it. And they generally will start on a point. So they'll start in Southampton, or they'll start in New York, or they'll start in Fort Lauderdale, or something in Los Angeles. And they will go all the way around the world and come back. Now, what's key about those is they last 100 days, 105 days, 120 days. But there will be a lot of sea days in those. So you'll find actually, even though you're away for 100 days, you might only be calling on, say, 39 ports or 40 ports of call. And some of them you'll have overnights in. So there's a lot of sea days in those. So actually very relaxing. So we did a 10-week leg once, and we did a three-week, maybe it was 4-week, can't remember now, leg. And, you know, that was just amazingly, incredibly relaxing, because, you know, you'd have a port, you have a couple of sea days, you'd have a port, you might have a couple of, you know, ports in Asia close together. That's very, very relaxing. So that's one bunch to look at. So it's actually relaxing because you just got time to pace yourself, and you know, there's lots of stuff going on board, but you feel less pressured to do it because, you know, you've got tomorrow to do it. Then the other group is the group that do more kind of world voyages, and they're really designed, and some of them are very long. So you look at Oceania, for example, their world cruise effectively lasts for half a year. In reality, what it is a series of pretty compact legs, because most people don't do that. And so you'll find then you've got a port every day. So it's pretty intense. So, you know, obviously if that's what you want to do, port every day, you want to get every single day a different place visiting, those are the ones to look at. But I would say definitely, so ironically, it's actually around the style of cruise than the cruise line itself. Now, the ultimate in terms of those who've been doing the longest world cruises is Cunard. Now, Cunard actually will be entering, I think in 2023, it might be 2022, and I'm sure it's almost 100% sure it's 2023. They will have been doing world cruises for 100 years, and they're the longest at doing it. They are really, really good at doing world cruises. So definitely take a look at the Cunard one. The one thing I would say, though, is, which is the downside of Cunard versus maybe a Princess or a Holland America or one of those cruise lines, is if you're going on a world cruise and you're traveling, say, Britannia, or in anything that has only fixed dining. So, for example, in Cunard, you have early dining and late dining in Britannia. Now, if you're in Princess, Britannia Club or Princess or Queen's School, you have anytime dining, but they don't have that equivalent in Britannia Club. So you've got to think, do I really want to go for 100 days where I know every day I have to eat at 6 and 8 or 8:30, depending on my slot? And I would think that's not very relaxing. So also look at the, you know, if you're on a Princess or some of the others, they have the anytime dining, which gives you more flexibility, because I think that will be really regimented. So that hopefully that's answered the kind of area that you're looking at. I would say look at that total circumnavigation, lots of sea days, and you'll find that really relaxing. Think about that dining element. And it's interesting because we were looking originally at doing a world cruise in 2023, and now with COVID and partners changed jobs, so we're not going to do it in 2023 now. We're probably going to do it 24, 25. But we're having that discussion around how intense do we want it to be, because when we did that 10-week leg, it was incredibly relaxing, lots of exercise and stuff. It was just, it was very good from that perspective. Bill making the good point is, you know, you're right, some cruise lines do have discounts for payment if you pay early, and that's because you do also, though, often give away a lot of the flexibility, particularly if fares change. So, you know, so that's really, that's a good point. Now there was a question about, I'm assuming there's a question around vaccine. So let me go back and make sure where I've missed out some of the questions so far. And I had a slig of thing. Here we go. And I don't know if I can answer this entirely, but I'll give you a sense. So I've been invited to join friends as a third person in cabin on board Queen Mary 2. Queen Mary 2 is a fantastic ship. Can you give me any idea what I can expect as a third berth guest? It's basically pretty much the same, other than you will be the person, I guess, sleeping on the sofa bed. So, but in terms of everything else, you'll find it is the same. So there's no other difference. You will still be paying your gratuities. Obviously, the fare, the third person in a dual cabin is slightly cheaper or whatever. But sounds for you, it's I don't know if you're paying that thing. But that's the only real key difference, is you're the one on the sofa bed. Now, one of the things, it depends on the cabin that you're in. So some of the cabins on Queen Mary 2, the great thing about those that do have the sofa bed is you have the little curtain piece between sort of where the either twin beds, or if they're put together as a double bed, are. So I'm not sure whether they can that, but you often have a little curtain, so you do have your little sense of your own area. But just double check that. I would actually check that you do have that in your cabin. Now, normally in the cabins which have the sofa bed, they normally have that, but just double check that, because that might be worth checking if the travel agent knows if you've got that, because that would be quite nice from a privacy perspective. But everything else will be the same. Your table allocation and everything would be the same, basically, from that. And I'm trying to remember the percentage for the discount in terms of the fare, so not sure. King TV, will MSC cruises be vaccine free in the US like other countries? We don't know that yet, but certainly MSC have not, in any country that I'm aware of, followed the vaccine rule. And I guess they do have, in the US, they have the ability to go down that route with the rule where you can do simulated cruises, where you don't have to follow the 95% passenger, 98% crew vaccination. So what I have seen is they are having their crew vaccinated. They're taking advantage of the crew being vaccinated. So they haven't made any move on that, but certainly they have been the most consistent around that. But definitely want to watch. It's going to be very interesting as you see how the different lines open up. And one of the questions a lot of people have in reality to the US is, are the US going to, in fact, in the lines, the US lines, the lines in the US when they open, are you're literally going to be able to choose a vaccinated ship or a non-vaccinated ship based on the destination and the rules and where they're going from stuff. And it's going to be very interesting. I know Matt in the Royal Caribbean blog was looking at how that looks like it is shaping up, because ships can effectively sail with a vaccine rule or go through simulated cruises. Now, what we haven't seen at all, coming back to your question, is we haven't seen anything, they haven't made any statement about the state of their application to the CDC for test cruises of any kind. Before they can get to the next stage, all the cruise lines have to submit agreements with the ports. So, for example, Carnival had issued, they got their approval for sailings out of Miami, out of Port Galveston, because they hadn't agreed the agreement they have to have in place yet with Port Canaveral, but they do want to sail out of Port Canaveral. I guess there was some issue there. But we haven't seen anything from MSC, so definitely want to watch. Obviously, the quickest way they can start sailing is to go down the vaccinated route. Oyster Prime, hello Gary, and thanks for the content. My friends and I are wanting to book our first ever cruise, fantastic. Oh, I don't know if that's first ever cruise to Alaska or first ever cruise to, whichever way it is, it's fantastic, for July 2022. Would it be best to wait for the wave period early next year? To be honest with you, I would look now at Alaska and see what it's shaping up and what sort of pricing you're getting across a number of different lines. You know, the Alaska season, sorry, just kick that again. The Alaska season, just did it again. The Alaska season, I think in 2022 is going to be very, very popular because it's effectively 2 seasons out. I know we've got ships sailing towards the end of the season, but you know, the numbers are not there. So in terms of demand, I think we'll see a lot of demand. So I would kind of look now and see what the prices are, and if you feel that they're kind of okay and acceptable. Certainly when I looked, because I actually moved my cruise, was I doing it this year? Or was it 2020 rolled over? I think it's been rolled over, I don't know how many times. So, and the prices were kind of the same. Prices haven't gone up, but I would kind of look now, to be honest, because the wave season is still although in the US, the wave seasons happen more frequently. I would look now and see if you're comfortable with the prices. I would then, if you're comfortable with the prices, I would book and then watch the prices. Because if the prices go down, you then have an opportunity to contact the line and say, look, I've seen the price has gone down. Can I go down to the new price? Which comes back to the point around not paying in full. If you've paid the deposit, you are normally able to get that price down. So that's what I would actually do. So Nicholas is asking, would you recommend setting a Celebrity Edge this summer? So Nicholas, I assume you're talking about the cruises which start up from Miami is it end of June 20th of June, 27th of June, something like that. I would be pretty optimistic about those cruises because assuming that they resolve the problem with Florida around the vaccination, then you're going to be talking about a cruise which is probably almost 100%, if not 100% vaccinated, because they're requiring everyone over the age of 18. Celebrity largely is going to attract. Whenever I've been on Celebrity, I've sort of been out of the school holiday period, and I'm sure there's been some kids on board, but it's going to be highly vaccinated. The crew have been vaccinated. So I would certainly be optimistic about it. What I would, my reservation would be, which maybe yours is, at the moment, it looks like the itinerary certainly that appear on the website talk about calling on Costa Maya and Cozumel. So is one comfortable in those? I'm not 100% sure whether it's cruise line excursions only or not. I got the impression it was, but I might be wrong. I might be wrong on that. So I would be more optimistic. I would probably just wait to see how it settles. If it was me, I'd be waiting a little bit to see how it settles down. Get better understanding around the capacity. Get better understand because it's not 100% clear on capacity. See what the final rules are going to be because it's not 100% clear on what the rules are. Will it be masked? Won't it be masked? Will you be able to sit with people that are not in your travel party? I would kind of let the dust settle. I'm not sure that these cruises, I mean, I might be wrong. I'm not sure these cruises will sell out. What we've seen in all these startup cruises around the world, they have not sold out. Some of them have been popular. We're seeing even in the UK, Middle East, a lot of capacity. We're seeing, you can still book to go on these cruises, and we've seen even a couple of promotions on those. So I would just let some of that certainty sort of settle down, get more certainty around that before booking. But certainly penciling in would be. So Matthew's asking, are all the shows on MSC usually 30 minutes, or is it just in COVID times? Just come back from the maiden voyage. Matthew, I'm not 100% sure, but certainly whenever I've been on MSC, which is not massive amounts of time, their shows have been short. They have always tended to be on the shorter side. So if anyone else knows the answer to that specifically, but generally they have had shorter shows. And I'm sure I was on an MSC Bellissima when they were doing one of their shakedown cruises in the UK, and they invited lots of travel agents, some bloggers and stuff to come in to see the ship. We spent one night over on, and they did a bit of a, it wasn't really a naming ceremony, but a bit of a ceremony. And all the shows on there were pretty short. So I think that's what they do, because often what they do, because of the size of the ship, because they're normally on big ships, is they normally have, even before COVID times, they were doing 3 shows a night. So 3 shorter shows a night in order to just, because get the people through the size, or get all the people through it with the limitations. So hopefully that answers your question. I hope you had a good time, by the way, on that cruise. Most people seem to have had, which is great. So Big Bry 65, which cruise line do you sail with the most? Well, I can tell you the cruise line that I have. So I've been on up until now 78 cruises, lasting from one night up to whatever 20, 30 nights, because on that 10-week cruises, the way they do it is they split it into 3 different cruises. Anyway, 20 of those have been on Cunard, which is 176 nights on Cunard. So the cruise line that I've been on the most in terms of total number of cruises is Cunard. Although I haven't been on Cunard now since 2016. So the one I'm doing in July will be the first time, but then I'm doing a crossing because they kept cancelled. So that's the cruise line I've spent on the most. And the reason for that is whenever I want to go on a cruise, which is not just me doing it because I want to do it and I'm doing a lot for the channel, good excuse to go on lots of cruises, and I'm going with my partner. My partner wants to go on Cunard every single time. we only go on maybe one cruise a year together, and so he absolutely adores Cunard, and is like, I'm going on one cruise a year, and I don't want to take a risk, and so I'm going to go on that. The only other cruise lines that we've tried, he's enjoyed enough, but so that's part of the reason. So every time I've gone, so for example, the cruise I'm doing, the short 3 nights I'm doing with my partner, of all the cruises I've booked in the summer, of which I have 6 of those, because I'm obsessed again, there's only one that he's coming with, and that's the Cunard one. And then next time we're going on a cruise together is a transatlantic in May. And not the other ones, it's like, yeah, whatever. It's not, so that's an answer. What's the second one? I need to look at what the second most one is. I'm actually doing a spreadsheet. I had a list of these. I'm now doing a spreadsheet because I like spreadsheets to work out more. But that's the one. So certainly, as I was mentioning, I'm coming up with a Cunard video, which is kind of being edited. So, and I get into that much more. But so hopefully that answers your question. So a lot of people talking about, what I was saying earlier around what it's going to be interesting to see eventually what proof is required in the US for these cruises, and so people that have the vaccination card, it'd be nice if it's digitized. It does sound like, though, that something's afoot. As I said earlier, I did see in the paper that because a lot of countries are looking for evidence of people coming in vaccinated to lift things like quarantining and stuff, and they're looking for more than just a bit of scrap of paper. So it did sound like something's afoot in the US. It's so nice in the UK. Once you've had both your vaccinations, you log onto your NHS app, and there it is. So I was with my best friend the other day. He had just had his second vaccination 14 days ago, and he didn't actually know that it was on the app. Went on the app, boom, it's there, just automatically there. So it's fantastic. Derek Burns org. Do you know if cruise lines UK domestic have took bookings for more than 1,000 guests, particularly after 21st June when limits were meant to be relaxed? If yes, possibly see bookings cancelled. So just to give everyone a perspective. So the rule in the UK, we've been through a series of, I think it's 4 different stages of unlocking. And one of the unlockings, which happened whenever it was it beginning of May or April, I can't remember what it was. But basically the rule was for big events like the theatre. So I've been at the theatre actually twice this week because I can't. Now the rule there is you can either have 50% occupancy or 1,000 people, whichever is the lower number. So for example, we went last night to the Palladium, which is like maybe a 3,000 seater, but there's only 1,000 people there. I went to see another theatre, another show, 6, 2 days before that, and there it was 50% because it's more than 1,000. So the rule on cruise ships up until the 21st of June is 1,000 passengers or 50%. So MSC Virtuoso, for example, which takes 5,000 passengers, only has 1,000 passengers on until the 21st of June. So Derek, your answer to your question is they absolutely have taken bookings for more than 1,000 guests. So if you take a look at Saga, for example, Saga Cruises, which is the first cruise that I'm going on, because I'm only going on cruises that have the vaccination rule. They are due to sail, well, they are sailing on the 27th of June, and they can only take 999 guests in normal times, and I think they're selling with 80% capacity they have sold. I think I saw that number. It's like, it might be 90%, 80% capacity. All the other cruise lines have higher than 50% capacity or 1,000 guests. So, after 21st June. So I guess the point you're making is if the government doesn't relax the rules, what will cruise lines do? And I guess we don't know what they're going to do yet, because we also don't know how well they've sold. So on many of the cruises, if you go on, you'll find you can still book most of those cruises. So I don't know in reality how much they've sold, and I haven't been able to find out exactly because they're very coy, I guess, both for commercial reasons, but also maybe they just don't want people to know. Because if people knew they were selling 80%, but you go on, that's only 60%, people go, well, no, they haven't sold out. So I haven't been able to find the answer. But certainly, you're absolutely right. If the rules don't change, then, for example, my Saga cruise on the 27th of June, they will have an issue because they will not be able to sail with 80% capacity. What they do about it, I haven't seen anything about it, and I'm wondering about that too. So I don't know the answer to the question, but hopefully that gives that gives a perspective, which is links to Michelle's question about heading to Alaska. Are the ships going out at full passenger capacity, or are they starting out at a lower capacity? Now, all the stuff that I've seen, Michelle, is that things are, so that disappeared for some reason, that they are going at low capacity, but I'm not entirely sure what the capacity is, because in the framework of conditional sailing, conditional sail order, it does talk about low capacity, but it doesn't specify that yet. So I don't know what the capacity is, and it's one thing that I'm also very keen as well to see. So as soon as I see that, I will definitely shout on that. So let's have a look. Excuse me. Have you been on an Edge class celebrity cruise? What's your opinion of the magic carpet and infinite verandas? So, Steve, I have been on the Edge. I haven't sailed on the Edge. So I've only been on a ship visit, and I was due to go on Apex this summer, which got cancelled, and I'm only due to then sail on Edge in January. I think I'm now going on Edge. So I haven't sailed on it. So, but I do know a lot of people who have sailed on, and certainly the infinite verandas have divided people at the moment. It's like 50-50, all the people that I've spoken to. So the people who are less keen on the infinite verandas they actually did a crossing, transatlantic. And what they found is that because it was very windy and stuff, is that quite often from the bridge they were overriding the ability to lower the verandas because of the wind and I guess just the way the ship was sailing or whatever. So they found it was being ridden. Their point was, of course, if it had been a normal balcony, they could have gone out anyway because that was just the nature of it. Then I know other people that really like it because it does actually give you the extra space in your cabin because effectively your balcony's in. So I think it's a real, I guess in the UK we talk about Marmite thing. So I haven't experienced yet, and I won't be able to give you first-hand experience. In terms of the magic carpet, again, very kind of mixed views. People really like the novelty of it. They like having their dining out there. So some people I know they've really enjoyed that. And a couple of people have commented because they have been on cruises when it's been used, which is one of its main reasons it was really put there, is to speed up the whole tendering process because it gives a bigger platform for tendering, and they have bigger tender boats. So actually people from that perspective really like the magic carpet because it did actually speed up the whole tendering process in tender ports. So sorry I didn't have more. If anyone else has direct experience of it, pop it in. One of the things you might want to do, Steve, is take a look at Brits on a Ship. They have a blog and they also do some stuff on YouTube, and they have covered the infinite balcony quite a lot. So they're definitely worth looking at. And also take a look at sparks.org, SPARKX. I'll maybe put the links in there because he was kind of, so Brits on the Ship were more skeptical and Marcus of Sparks was much more positive. So you might get a good perspective from that. Thank you, Kathy. Doesn't have a question, but likes the videos, which is fantastic. Now, I've seen the question from A.E. Robinson. I've been trying to think of an answer to this while I've been answering the questions. What's the thing that most surprised you about cruising when you first started, and what surprises you even now with your experience? And I don't know if I can answer that. I probably need to think about this much more. I think probably the thing that surprised me about cruising the most when I first started was just how much I liked it, because I was like one of those people that was always like, it's not for me and I don't get the point. And when I went on my first cruise, which was not by choice, I was asked to actually go on a cruise to give a talk. It was a chartered ship. It was P&O Aurora. The ship was chartered. It was like a marketing conference thing, and I was asked to go and talk on it. And I was like, fine. And that's when I kind of experienced cruising. So that was the thing, that just how amazing cruising was and how amazing being at sea is. And still, to me today, the absolute highlight of cruising, one of the things that I love the most, is sea days and just sailing through the sea. So that's probably the thing. And the other thing that surprised me, I guess, is just how fast things change. You know, the innovations and the constant changing, whether it's on a smaller scale, which is just, you know, more and more specialty restaurants suddenly, you know, becoming the thing, through to the bells and whistles. I'm less enamored by some of the bells and whistles, you know, the go-karts and the rock climbing walls, because that all just feels a little bit manufactured. And I know it's very popular, but it's just more that sense of everything constantly changing, constant innovation, constantly, you know, moving. I think that's the thing. And just like what's just when you think you've got a grip on things, something else happens which kind of, you know, surprises you. So I'll try and have more of a think about that. Maybe that'll be a good topic for a video, actually, is the sort of things that I didn't expect. And I didn't actually have an idea for a video around that. So maybe that's it'll be a really good one to talk about it as a video. So it's got some good video ideas. Remember, by the way, if you ever have ideas for videos, drop me a line, email me, or drop it in the comments. It's always great to have ideas for video ideas. Let me answer this question quickly from Mike. We booked on a saga cruise to the Baltics in September. What is the chance of it going ahead? Mike, this is a real question that I'm asking. I have a September kind of a normal cruise heading off to, I'm going to the fjords, not the Baltics. I actually cancelled my Baltic cruise, which was due to go in August. I never thought that was happening. September for me is still this real uncertainty period. You know, if you look at the Baltics, you've got, you know, Russia, you're going to Finland, I guess you go to Tallinn, you probably send of Copenhagen or Stockholm or wherever. So quite a lot has to happen in those places. However, you know, when you're talking about going to places like Russia, you normally often go on kind of bubbly kind of excursions anyway. So to me, it's a real 50-50 at the moment. I think a lot's going to hinge on how much the UK, because obviously you're in the UK doing saga, how much the UK relaxes what's on its green list, amber list, etc. by September. Hopefully by then it's going to be really good. And also what the rules are going in. To me, it feels a real good, strong 50-50, looking more promising. And certainly that's what the UK government's saying, is they're hoping that certainly international cruising is going to be allowed by that September time. As you know, only domestic cruises are allowed, with the objective of around September. All the UK lines have only done those UK sailings until end of August into September. So I would say it's kind of a 50-50 kind of thing. And I'm hoping that we do see by September things, you know, really ramping up, because I would really like to get that, you know, get back out into calling on places. Linda, the answer to the question is no. I definitely would love to go on that, and that's one thing that I do have on my list. American Cruise Line looks absolutely fantastic. Well, we've already gone through a whole hour. I see there's lots of questions here about insurance. Hopefully that's asked it. PepsiCo ballpark cost of a world cruise, it can be anything from $15,000 in an inside cabin in a more value line up to $250,000 per person. I think you should, if you want to go in kind of, if you assume it's anything, if you go in a balcony kind of cabin, what you might want for a world cruise, you're talking, you know, maybe $300-400 a day for a cabin, but you're up to like thousands and thousands of dollars. So it's pretty hard, but you're talking, you know, a good 30, 40, 50, 60 and upwards, you know, amount. It's huge. But it's really worth it. And working out the per day thing becomes really important. Thanks so much. The hour always flies by. Just amazing questions. I'm just having a look. I'll try, as I said before, with other questions that come along, I try and answer them at the beginning of the next one, or I try and you know, do them in other separate videos or etc. So I've lost the way to take that off. So anyway, well, yeah, do yourself, take it out the door, hit that like button. Thank you very much, Sabine. Thanks so much for joining. I hope you enjoyed this hour. I hope you enjoy the rest of the weekend. If you're in the UK, it's a long weekend. The weather's pretty good, nice blue skies outside. So if you enjoy that wherever you are in the world, great thing is we can be looking at cruises, planning cruises, booking for cruises, watching people on cruises. So hopefully you have a great weekend. Remember, I have a video coming out tomorrow, which is all that whole thing to do with pricing. So for that's interested. So until, oh, by the way, next week, there definitely will be no live stream next week because I am away for the weekend and I won't be able to do a live stream. So we'll only be one in 2 weeks' time. So I'll make sure I post about that as well and stick to it this time. Thanks very much. Take care and stay safe.